Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Lunch Hour Live here at the GBH studio. I'm Sue O'Connell. We're at the Boston Public Library. So glad you could join us. So thrilled to have the second installment of our author series. And our guest today is former host of NPR's Only a Game, Bill Littlefield. But today, Bill, we're going to be talking about his new book, Mercy, which is a novel made up of the interwoven and overlapping stories of a collection of people who are living in a suburban, somewhat urban kind of neighborhood. Welcome, Bill. Great to see you.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Let's start with you reading an excerpt for us just to get the stage set.
All right. I'm going to actually read the beginning of the book. The first chapter is called Boy in the Yard. And it's mostly dialogue, but you'll get some sense of. What did you say? What I could, I said. And Henry put down his coffee and looked at me. How old is he? 11, I said. And how did he ask? I don't remember exactly, I said. It was something like, what happens when you die? Or maybe what happens after you're dead? I'm not sure. Yikes, Henry said. And then, Jack, maybe we should have some more coffee. I told him some people believe that after you die, you're judged, and that judgment determines where your spirit or your soul will spend eternity. He's 11, Henry said. I had to say something, I said, or I thought I did. I told him some people say you go to heaven, which they think is a place where you see the people you loved while you were alive. He didn't ask about the other people? Of course he did. I told him the other people got punished for whatever they'd done wrong during their lives. Maybe they got to heaven later. How did he take that? He said, everything you've done wrong? So I told him it was maybe only the really important things.
That's great. What a delightful book this is in capturing the way people really talk and the way people really behave and the things that contribute to your life. There's a lot of characters, but can you give us the gist?
Yeah, there are a lot of characters, and the characters are very different from each other, but what happens over the course of the novel is the reader discovers that these characters who aren't much like each other have made connections in the past that they remember with varying degrees of accuracy. There's a central sort of incident that involves a woman who becomes a very respectable, more or less happily married housewife and a minor gangster. And it turns out that many years earlier, when they were both sort of 17, 18-year-old, they had an encounter on a beach, a very hot August day on the beach on the Jersey Shore, where the young guy was hungover, lying on the beach, hoping that maybe he would be lucky enough to die so that it wouldn't be such a painful morning under the hot sun. And this woman sees him, this young woman sees him on the beach, and on impulse, she grabs his arm and she pulls him into the ocean. And he falls over and gets swamped by a wave and comes up sputtering, and he feels great. His headache is gone, his stomach ache is gone. And he says to her, how do you know to do that? And she doesn't know how she knew to do that. It's an act of pure, spontaneous mercy. And years and years and years later, after they don't know each other's names, they don't know anything about each other, but years and years later, they're in proximity to one another. And maybe it's the proximity that causes each of them to remember that incident. And the man who was that teenage boy wonders if anybody has ever been so kind to him again. And the woman, who is the grown-up suburban housewife, wonders if as an adult she would be capable of a spontaneous act of mercy. It's that kind of connection throughout.
There's the connection of the mercy, the connection of the cruelty. There's also a lot of cruelty, a lot of casual cruelty, I think, that many people would be able to relate to. The way some institutions treat children, those who are imprisoned, a whole number of themes there. Yet so delicately written, I think, but also sharply written. How did you make that balance between sort of harsh realities, but keeping your characters human and compassionate and feeling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so, and thank you very much. You've said some very nice things about the book, and I hope everybody's listening carefully. The harsh reality, the cruelty, is not going to be a surprise to anybody. We live in a time where, look at what is going on even now. Time after time after time, clear and terrifying evidence of what a bad idea it is to have automatic weapons available to 18-year-old boys. And yet, the people in power who could do something about that are so much enthralled to the gun lobby that they don't do anything about it. And so the cruelty is out there, and the kind of random nastiness of accidents and plagues and people getting elected who don't know what they're doing except to self-aggrandize and try and make money. So the trick is to create people who are capable of loving each other and feeling sympathy for each other and responding and relating to each other despite the odds against it, which we face. And I found it to be a wonderfully empowering act to create those people, and then wake up the next morning and they maybe were talking to me at night while I was sleeping, and I'd wake up and see what they were going to do next. It was great fun.
That leads us to the writing process. Folks obviously know you from It's Only a Game, which you hosted for many years, but
Fewer and fewer of them probably since I left in 2018.
right. Well, it's still not yet. Well, maybe, who knows? We'll count them. But you're an accomplished author, writing teacher. What number book is this for you?
It's my third published novel. And if there are agents and publishers listening, I got a couple more that I'd be happy to send you. But I've also written a bunch of nonfiction. I did a book with the great photographer Henry Horenstein called Baseball Days, and a couple collections of commentaries and a couple of books for younger readers.
When you're writing, do the characters come to you in your dreams, as you mentioned? Are you one of those authors who maps it all out and makes predictions on where your characters are going to take you, or do they just take you?
Every time somebody asks me a question like that, I think of William Faulkner and his maps of Yoknapatawpha County, where you open the first page of one of his novels, and there's a little map shows you where Flem Snopes lives and all the rest. No. I've always felt that if I knew exactly what was going to happen in anything that I was writing, there'd be no reason to write it. I write it in order to find out what's going to happen next. And so this is the first book I ever wrote where I was writing 4 or 5 chapters at the same time. And depending on what sorts of things I was feeling when I'd get up in the morning, that would determine which chapter I'd work on that day. So I certainly didn't know what was going to happen.
I'm speaking with Bill Littlefield. He's the author of his new book, Mercy. If you're here with us at the library and you have a question for Bill, you could just raise your hand. We'll have someone come over and get a question, and we'll ask him about it. Let's talk about the work that you also do with folks who have been imprisoned, writing projects. How long have you been doing that? What's the process, and what have you learned from it?
I started working, with the Emerson Prison Initiative right after I retired from radio work in 2018. And I was trained by a group called Petey Green, which trains and places people to work with incarcerated individuals. And it was my great good fortune to hook up with the Emerson program. And I've been working with the same group of about 16, 18 guys incarcerated at MCI Concord for the last 4 years. And they will graduate with a bachelor's degree.
That's great.
In September. So yeah, it is. It's amazing.
Yep.
So I started as the world's oldest teaching assistant. And I worked with them on their writing, and next semester I'm going to teach a course on creative nonfiction, which for them will mostly be autobiography. But I've learned more in that experience than in 40 years previous teaching.
People have told me that they are often shocked at how difficult it is to volunteer and participate in programs to help the incarcerated. You know, as the saying has been for the past few years, the cruelty is by design. And was that your experience as well?
It's not really fair to boil my experience down to one conclusion, because I have met correctional officers who are nasty, sarcastic, unpleasant people, but I've also met a lot of correctional officers who, for example, there's a fellow who works in Concord, and after I've gone through a series of gates and doors and everything else that you go through and been searched and everything else, he always sees me coming in and he waves and he says, "Hey, good to see you again. You're doing great work with these guys. I really appreciate it." So what are you going to say? I mean, you know, he's on our team in terms of helping these guys out. But the main thing is you learn, or I should say I learned very quickly, that the guys with whom I was working are just people. And they're funny, and they're incredibly self-confident. After a certain point, they're amazingly supportive of each other. You know, you teach in a high school, you're going to hear a lot of sarcasm, a lot of cruelty, a lot of nastiness. It's not there. It's all good humor. If somebody has a problem with the paper they're writing, there's going to be somebody else who sits down and says, "Let me help you out with that." They all, except for one guy, every one of the people I've worked with was arrested when they were very young. Most of them have been in the system one way or another since they were kids. All of them were sentenced to very long terms when they were 19, 18 years old. And 20 years, 15 years later, they're just not the same person. And there's nothing that really recognizes that that's the way the brain works. That so
Yeah,
you know,
it's
they all, most of them were members of gangs because the gang was the social opportunity that existed in the place where they grew up. One guy wrote a beautiful essay about the Emerson program and the opportunity that he had, and the teachers that come in from not only Emerson but also several other schools. And he said, my first reaction, my first response to this program was anger at the crappy education that I was offered when I was a kid, which was no education at all. He was put in the back of the class and told to be quiet, and at the end they'd let him out. So it was prison before prison.
Right.
And there was nothing happening that was positive. And then all of a sudden he gets in this Emerson program, and people are asking him, let's do a little thinking, let's do a little writing, let's do a little developing and growing. And he realized, man, if that had been happening when I was 16, 17 years old, I wouldn't be here doing a long term.
Yeah, the grief of realizing what you're
Yes,
mourning that you
exactly.
didn't know that you didn't
Exactly.
have, and now you
Exactly.
have it.
And you know, unless you're one of those incredibly fortunate people who has a mentor, has somebody who can show them an alternative to what seems there, it's very tough.
So some of the characters in your book have done some time.
Yes.
One of the lead.
One of them has done an extraordinary amount
Amount
of
of time. How did your experiences working with incarcerated folks and being in that environment, how did that help inform writing Mercy?
Yeah, it certainly did. Partly its place. You cannot know, I think, what it's like to be incarcerated, or to even to be in a place where people are incarcerated, unless you've been in it and walked across the yard and been searched and had a bunch of questions asked and gone through a bunch of doors that slide shut behind you. So that's part of it. But the major part of it, as I say, is, the function of incarceration is isolation. So that most people who are out here, they don't think about people who are in there. And that's kind of the way the system wants it to be. But when you go in and you meet these guys, at least the ones that I've met, and I don't pretend to be an expert, there's 600 or 700 guys incarcerated in Concord, and I only know maybe 20 of them, as well as they allow me to know them. But what you learn is that they're just people. They're just people who, there's a saying in that world, which is, how would you like to be judged for the worst thing you've ever done?
Right.
And they all got judged by the worst thing they ever did, and they're paying for it, and a lot of them will pay for it for a long, long time.
In Mercy, I also notice a lot of conscious denial, if you will. Folks living a life and not wondering how their life has been brought to them, or things that they don't want to pay attention to as they're, I'm trying not to put any spoilers in here, as they're going through their days, how to make sure they don't have to pay attention to the thing that would be a problem, while acknowledging that it exists. How do you write that? How do you explain, and make the denial a character, if you will, and at the same time give the power of the denial to your character?
Well, doesn't it, what you're talking about, doesn't it reflect our experience, everybody's experience? You encounter something incredibly unfair, unjust, and you say, oh boy, I should write a check. Right. But then you realize in the mail there are 6 more organizations that tell you about something incredibly unjust, and maybe you should write them a check too. And maybe you should be out, with a sign, and maybe you should be writing your senator or your congressman. But if you live in Massachusetts, you realize that your senators and your congressmen are already on the right side, and there's no point. And if I write Ted Cruz, I get a form letter back saying, write your own senator.
Right.
Don't bother me.
Thanks for your thoughts, Bill.
So there is a certain level of frustration, I think, to being alive on the planet these days. And I was trying to talk about that. There's a woman, there's a character in Mercy who has this fantasy that in a given week she will write a check to each of the organizations that's trying to, improve the world, and then she'll throw all of them away for the next 3 weeks, and then the beginning of the next month she'll do it again. And she has this fantasy that if everybody did that, it might actually make a difference, instead of everybody throwing the stuff away. And it's the kind of fantasy that allows us to go on, isn't it? I mean, we all do our best and realize that the problems are so enormous that all we can do is take it one day at a time and help where we can.
Talking with Bill Littlefield about his new book, Mercy, here at the GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. A question from the audience: how many hours a day do you write?
Some days a lot of hours, and some days almost none. And some days I sit and look at the screen and don't write anything at all. But the funny thing
about writing,
the real answer to that is, if I'm involved in writing a short story, or if I'm involved when I was involved in writing Mercy, it never really stops. The characters are sort of developing all the time. So I might be watching a television show, or I might be taking a walk or something, and it's still going on, even if I'm not sitting in front of my computer typing. So I'm not sure it ever stops.
Do you miss them when you're done writing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Just
Would
like
that lead you to another book, another
Well, I'm
I know
right.
this one's not even out yet. It's
Yeah,
coming
this
out
one
next
doesn't
week,
come out
so I
till
don't
the
want
end
to
of
push
July.
it too far.
People can get this now by
Right.
going to Black Rose Writing and getting a 15% off.
There you go.
The discount.
Yep.
Or you can get it from Amazon, pre-order it if you want to. Or better, go to your local bookstore and pre-order it there, because then the bookstore will live another day.
So another question from the audience. What surprised you about the incarcerated people that you met? Was there anything that was surprising to you? I mean, did you go in with a mindset about what it might be like or what they might be like, and it was different?
Yeah, I went in with a mindset, and the mindset was completely overturned very quickly. The most exciting thing that I discovered was the courage, the sense of humor, the sense of camaraderie, the way in which they were incredibly supportive of each other. A lot of the guys that I worked with were coming to the classroom from different parts of the prison, so they didn't necessarily see each other except when they came to class, and they would come in and greet each other as if they hadn't seen each other in years, and they would embrace, they would shake hands with this very complicated handshake, and encourage each other and all the rest. And they were, the time that I was teaching there, they were going through COVID, so every once in a while the whole place would be shut down, and volunteers and visitors wouldn't be allowed in either. And they would be 23 and a half hours in cells because they were trying to, prevent COVID from spreading. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they maintain their positive attitude, their sense of humor, their determination to keep doing the work and moving toward a degree. Because for almost all of these guys, getting a degree doesn't mean they're going to get out.
Right.
It might help at the next parole hearing if they can say, here's one of the things I've been doing while I was incarcerated. It might help, but there's no guarantee that just because they have a BA, they're going to get out.
We can't go too much further without talking about sports, Bill. You're not going to get out of here without us talking about sports. Only a game, great, just such a wonderful gem. I miss you. I miss
Thank you. That's very nice to hear.
I occasionally will sit in my car on a Saturday and wonder where you are, and here you are. Do you miss hosting Only a Game, or where is it?
Well, I hosted Only a Game for 25 years.
Yeah.
And I worked with some absolutely wonderful people over the course of those 25 years. Great staff members, some of whom actually worked for GBH later. Katie Clark, one of my favorite people in the world, worked for GBH for the world for some time. And I miss some of those people a lot. But over the last little while, coming up to 2018, the program was changing. There were pressures from various people to change the way the program worked. And I found as I was getting towards 70 years old that I was trying to defend some of the stuff that I thought worked pretty well in the program, and I was watching it get shifted out so that other things were going to happen. And it just became less fun than it used to be. So unfortunately, I miss the great days,
Right.
and I miss, as I say, many of the people with whom I worked, although some of them I'm still in touch with a bit. But I don't really miss going in every day, and I don't really miss that routine. I love being retired, and I love writing what I want to write.
Yep.
And it's been great. And then I couldn't have done the Emerson Prison Initiative if I was still working full time, because it's
another job.
it takes time.
I know how you say you're retired, but you're
Yeah.
writing a book and you're working on.
But so don't you think? I mean, the advice to people who would retire. Don't you think you have to retire to something?
I
You
absolutely.
don't.
My doctor has advised me that if I ever retire, I have to make sure I have a full-time job.
Well,
Of some sort, whether it's job.
There was a
and
guy who was
fingers.
the general manager at WBUR for a while. Was Paul LaCamera.
Yep.
Maybe you know
Yep.
Paul. And Paul retired shortly before I did, and I was talking to him one day, and he said, "You're going to love it, except for one thing." And I said, "What's that?" And he He said, after a while, when you're retired, you're going to wonder how you ever had time to have a job. Yeah, that's kind of the way it is. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of good stuff to do.
All right, let's talk about the Celtics.
Okay.
I'm I think the only person in Boston who hasn't seen any of the games.
Well, last night was a good one.
I heard that. Are you? I've talked to a number of people. Again, haven't seen the games, haven't been following the team, but there's this feeling that again in Boston we're at this moment of maybe finally our sort of racial horror of the past, especially around our sports teams. I mean, I think we had a moment with this. Was it 2008 or 2011? The Ubuntu moments where the team were, together, and I remember walking through the city during the Duck Boats parade for the Celtics that year and seeing the diversity of the city and thinking, oh, yay, we did it. And, of course, we didn't. But there's a feeling that the Celtics are lifting Boston. Celtics, again, lifting Boston again. What's your impression?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of truth to that, obviously. I mean, people get involved with their teams and people get involved with their local teams. But the connection is such a once removed kind of connection. And it's especially true. I mean, when I was a kid, I'll date myself, growing up in New Jersey, very close to New York, and Willie Mays came up and was playing with the old New York Giants before they moved to San Francisco. And there were wonderful stories about how Willie Mays would be out on the street playing stickball with the neighborhood kids.
Right.
They're not like that anymore. I mean, today's pro athletes are extraordinarily well paid, at least if they last any length of time with their teams. And they're very insulated for the most part. So it's a big deal if one of them is involved in a community event. And that didn't used to be the case. It used to be that pro athletes had to get a job in the off season. They sold insurance or they worked in a factory somewhere because they didn't make enough.
Or you would run into them on the street. I was forever
Exactly, at the
jumping out of the
grocery
car
store.
with my dad because Hawk was over there.
Right,
And we needed to go say hi to him,
Right. Well, and he was one of
There's
the
Johnny Busick around
he was
the
one
corner.
of the more extraordinary ones who was perfectly willing to say hi to everybody.
Right, that's true, that's true.
That's true. I don't want to, diminish it because it's great fun when you root for a team and you live in a city and the team is doing well and there's an exciting series going on. And we've had a number of exciting series going on with the Celtics this time around. But I think real understanding between classes or races has to happen at a much more fundamental level than the level of, oh, I'm rooting for this guy because he's going to bring a championship to Boston, and it's.
And we all agree on that.
Yeah, it's not a hard thing to agree on. So.
Well, Bill Littlefield, I have so enjoyed chatting with you and meeting you. This is a very, very excellent book, Mercy.
Thank you.
I definitely recommend it to folks. Appreciate you coming in and talking with us. And again, you can pre-order this at Black Rose Press and certainly at your local bookstores as well. Bill Littlefield, thanks so much. What a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.